A single mistake by Satyavati had altered the course of destiny. When Satyavati unknowingly exchanged the sacred rice portions prepared by sage Richika, the destinies of two bloodlines became intertwined. Richika had intended one portion to create a peaceful Brahmin son and the other to create a mighty Kshatriya warrior. But after the exchange, everything changed. Though Richika used his spiritual power to soften the consequences, he could not completely erase fate. The warrior will not be born in our son, he had said, but he will appear in the next generation. Years passed. Jamadagni had indeed grown into everything his father had hoped. A wise and revered sage, his hermitage, a place of learning and light. Seekers traveling from distant lands just to sit in his presence. And yet, a quiet unease never left him. He had 5 sons, and every day he watched them, truly watched them, the way a man watches a fire to see which direction the wind will take it. He was searching for something in their eyes, in the way they moved, in the way they reacted to the world around them. He was looking for the warrior that Richika had foreseen. One of these 5 boys carried that ancient, redirected bloodline within him, a Kshatriya soul wrapped in Brahmin skin. But which one? That question haunted Jamadagni without rest. While the sage observed his sons in the hermitage, his wife Renuka went about her daily tasks with the quiet devotion that had defined her entire life. Her loyalty to her husband and her family was not merely a matter of character. It had become something almost supernatural. Such was the power of her purity and chastity that the clay pitcher she used to carry water from the river each morning held together without ever being fired in a kiln. It was raw, unbaked clay, and yet it did not crack, did not crumble. Her inner strength was the only glaze it needed. That morning, she made her way to the river as usual. As she turned to walk back toward the bank, 2 Gandharvas passed across the sky above her. Celestial beings, limber and radiant, their smiles carrying the careless beauty of things that have never known sorrow. For just a moment, Renuka's gaze met theirs. It was nothing more than a glance, a heartbeat of distraction, a flicker of something human stirring inside a woman who had spent her whole life being more than human. But that was enough. The pitcher slipped from her hands and shattered on the riverbank. The clay that her purity had held together could no longer hold. She knelt and tried desperately to shape it again with trembling fingers, but the mud dissolved into the river water and was carried away. She sat there for a long time, staring at the water. When she finally rose and walked back to the hermitage at dusk, she already knew. He knew. Jamadagni stood in her path. He did not shout. He did not weep. He looked at the clay stains on her clothes, and the truth passed between them without ceremony. And then he called his sons together and gave them an order that no father should ever give. He commanded them to take their mother's life. The 4 elder sons could not do it. They collapsed before him, pleading, their bodies frozen between love for their mother and obedience to their father. How could a father ask such a thing? How could sons raise a blade against the woman whose womb had carried them? Jamadagni's patience turned to wrath. He looked at his 4 elder sons with eyes that they turned to stone. Their horror, their resistance, their very humanity crystallized in an instant. 4 statues standing where 4 sons had been, frozen in the posture of their refusal. And then, into that terrible silence, the youngest acted. Before anyone could say another word, Rama had already moved. His parashurama, his axe, had already fallen, and Renuka was gone. Rama stood with blood on his blade and stillness in his eyes. No trembling, no tears, no hesitation in his face. He had heard his father's command, and he had obeyed it completely, without the interference of emotion. Jamadagni looked at his youngest son for a long time, and then he understood. This was the one. This was the boy Richika had spoken of. The warrior blood had found its vessel at last. This quiet, still, terrifying young man who could end a life and not break apart. He offered Rama 2 boons, any 2 desires the boy wished. Without a moment's pause, Rama asked for his mother's life and his brother's restoration. The sage stood in silence for a moment, and then he granted both. Renuka breathed again. The 4 brothers blinked back into themselves, flesh and warmth returning where stone had been. And Jamadagni placed the axe back in Rama's hand. But this time, the name he used was different. From that day forward, he was Parashurama, Rama of the axe. Another sacred avatar of Vishnu, descended to walk the earth in an age that needed not gentle wisdom, but fierce, unyielding justice. The years passed. Parashurama's reputation grew quietly. Then came the day that would set fire to everything.